So it's been a while since we had the last lecture. So let's go back to our exercise. Today we'll do something new also. But sit, relax, plant your feet on the ground, like they have roots, like they say in yoga. Close your eyes and put your hand on the person next to you. So, in this state of mind, try to, and we'll talk about it a little bit more today, what exactly you're supposed to do, but try to let go of anything that you can let go. This is sometimes called the phenomenological reduction, but let's just begin by saying try to let go as much as you can. This is supposed to eliminate a lot of layers of meaning, the social layers of meaning, the some of the aesthetic layers of meaning, and you're supposed to kind of end up feeling like, when all the onion peels have been peeled, then you're supposed to feel like a being thrown into the world with other beings. So let me talk a little bit about this throwedness. It's a kind of a new concept. I don't think that we spoke about it so much. So when you kind of find yourself in this world, like a being in a world with other beings, you're supposed to feel that because you are touching another person, then closing your eyes and doing all this stuff does not bring you inside, inwardly, but it leaves you outwardly, but in a world that is where a lot of layers of meaning have been eliminated. That is the point. And in order, this idea of eliminating all those layers of meaning, this is what I would like to talk about, is letting go. But before we get more into it, I would like to add a new aspect to the exercise. Try to synchronize your breathing with somebody else. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to do anything. But as we speak, try to synchronize your breathing with somebody else. I'll let you a second to do that. Okay, so what happens here, this is a kind of an interesting example of the type of connections that the phenomenology is talking about, because when you synchronize your breathing, you become coupled with somebody else. But this coupling is quite special because it's not so clear that when you couple yourself, you really change any of the extrinsic facts about the world, and yet the fact that you are coupled is a fact, that becomes a fact, but it's a kind of a strange kind of a fact, because A maybe can be coupled with B, and it's not so clear that thereby B is coupled with A. It might not be transitive. A can be coupled with B, B and C, but A may not be coupled with C. So it seems like it's a pretty strange relation, and yet it is something completely real. And whether you are coupled or you're not coupled, these two worlds are different. So this is an example of the type of facts that you can bring into existence through intention, and they change the world of facts. But without necessarily changing anything extrinsic. This is an important point because this coupling, the idea that you couple with somebody else or something else, will become very important later on when you discuss like the intentions of the photographer that we left last time. So just remember this example. Think about two worlds, One of them where you are coupled with the breathing of somebody else, and another world where you are not. These two worlds are different, obviously, and yet it is a little bit difficult to understand what exactly is different about that, because it's also clear what physical facts are different. Of course, you can say that you can become coupled with somebody else by coincidence. This is also possible, and sometimes you become aware of these facts, sometimes you are not aware of these facts, and all these questions are kind of important, are philosophical questions, but you should kind of keep them in mind, because later on we are going to talk about that when what the photographer wants to do is something like stream something that comes from somebody else. So the precondition of the streaming is some kind of a coupling. And this coupling you can begin to understand by this example of synchronizing your breathing with somebody else. This would be like the first, the first insight into this state. Now, so we did this exercise, we are letting go, we come out on the other side, we are being in the world occupied by other beings. But now I want to talk a little bit about throwedness. This is one of these Heideggerian concepts that are kind of interesting, but a little bit ridiculous. So when you kind of turn up and you reflect on being a being in a world with other being, you don't say to yourself that you come out of a specific place, or that a specific place has meaning for you, for the type of being that you are, but you feel that you've been thrown into the world. That's an important point. I don't know if you imagined a world where people kind of grow out of the ground, or things that do grow out of the ground, to distinguish it from this world, but maybe even if a seed grows in a particular place, maybe this seed could have grown in another place. So maybe it's not even something that is only true about things that have the possibility of motion. Now, if you ever studied physics, you know that they say, you talk about a mechanical system, you talk about a state of a mechanical system, the position and momentum, and then there's a space of all the possibilities of position and momentum, and then the physical theory tells you that the point can be in any point of the space, in any of the possibilities. So this is more or less what Heidegger talks about when he talks about that we are thrown into the world. It's just a lot more dramatic, but the concept is actually that we can be in any of the points in this world. And the point that we find ourselves is a point that does not have an intrinsic significance to our kind of being. And in some part, it seems that this throwedness, that we were thrown into the world, this actually functions philosophically in an important way, but we'll get back to it eventually. When we think about other beings, we think that they're also thrown into the world. So we are the kind of being that share a world where all of us were thrown into. That's another step in this direction. So then, into this world comes the light. It's another element that is required for a being to self-show. Heidegger talks about the concerns of phenomenology is self-showing being. That is the concern. And he thinks that this self-showing is the most elementary concept of truth, because Truth, according to him, we spoke about it a little bit last time, truth is not a correspondent of a proposition with a fact, but truth, aletheia in Greek, he talks about it quite a lot. So we're talking about self-showing as an area where the world opens up. But in order, so the self-showing is from the point of view of the object that shows. From the point of view of the others, it is an open area in the world where some things are self-showing. That's all. It's going to become quite an important. But you need light because you cannot do this self-showing without the light. So therefore, we are beginning to get into this basic scenario that we have. This world is being in a world with other being, and then there are kind of rays of light that light certain things, and this light can be the foundation on which some of them can show themselves. Some of these beings show themselves. And from the point of the observer, apparently we have insatiable appetite for these places, just to be connected to these places where the world opens up to us. This is some kind of a very basic attraction that we will talk about it shortly. What is the attraction there? Why are we so attracted to places where the light shines somewhere and the world opens up? This is going to be the basic question. So there's so in this scenario, you have one being that goes into the light to self-show, and then another being that kind of looks at this place where the world opens up and gets this immediate strong attraction of going there and trying to stream something out of this open part of the world. Okay. So, but, and the point is, as I was saying last time, it is quite interesting, and this was one of the reasons why I started getting interested in the whole thing, is that, so if you imagine this world and beings, and then there's this light, some of them go in, some of them are trying to get in touch with that, then you actually get the world of photography, because that's what the camera cares about. Areas where the things show themselves, and therefore as a photographer, you can kind of go and connect with these things, and insofar as there's this insatiable appetite for places where the world opens up, so photography is somehow related to this basic attraction in a variety of different ways, and we'll explain how it is related in different ways. But the point is, but don't mistake what I'm saying, that first of all, it is not the camera itself that is responsible for that, but it is, of course, the photographer. And what the camera does is just, as long as the photographer uses the photographer has to be oriented only to darkness and light, and therefore the camera helps the photographer to get to this metaphysical level. We are only interested in self-showing, to the detriment of everything else. So the camera is like some kind of a device that forces you, or at least helps you, to get into this basic metaphysical level where the only thing that matters are things that show up, in the light, and you're trying to get in touch with these areas of the world where they show up. But here there are a few things that need to be said. First of all, that there might be other ways in which the being show themselves, or certain aspect of the being become shown. For example, perhaps it, if you have like a seed of the flower, so when the seed, blooms, then a side of the original flower it shows up. So this is a much more complicated case than a case where something shows up just by standing at the light. So I don't mean to suggest that this very simple scenario that we are talking about is the only scenarios that phenomenology is interested in. But for our purposes, it is actually a very convenient focus, because there is no doubt that to get to a point where we are really only interested in this light where things show themselves, there's no doubt about it, that if you can really keep it this way, then you really do get to the metaphysical level that phenomenology is talking about. So why don't we say that what we are doing now, let's call it phenomenography, like phenomenology insofar as it pertains to photography. And this might sound to some Heidegger scholars great oversimplification, but this is okay, because we are really interested in something quite specific, and we can take it further away than it can be taken in other contexts, because it is something very specific and we understand it pretty well. So we will just go in this direction and not think that much about the ultimate scope of phenomenology, because maybe there are other ways to realize the entire processes that we are talking about. But let's not talk about it. That's the first important point. And I'm just saying in passing that this is stuff that I thought about. So you cannot read about it exactly, neither in Heidegger nor in Merleau-Ponty. That's why I told you to read the introduction to Phenomenology of Perception. I didn't even tell you to read that much in Heidegger because you will not find it there, the way I put it, just very simply. If you have questions, if you think something is inconsistent, too simplistic, just, you are really invited to take part in this thing, because I'm kind of inventing it as I go along, So I would love to have any kind of feedback about it. Okay, so we have this scenario of the photographer paying attention to the camera, so therefore in this state of mind only darkness and light are relevant, looking at places where there's light, where the world opens up, some beings reveal themselves, and the photographer tries to get in touch with these things. So this is the basic scenario that we are talking about. But then we also have to think about the other side of the equation, which we'll get to maybe not today, but soon. And this is the point of view of the being that steps into the light in order to self-show. So this is the other perspective that we are going to talk about. And the question is, are there, if this is the type of question that we asked several times, if this level that we're talking about is so deep, so are there any indication that the culture generally is interested, or any indication that these type of concerns are actually the concerns that we can find in our culture? And the answer, of course, is that a certain type of portraiture is the indication that we really are interested, that the culture is really interested in this idea of stepping into the light to show yourself. And this is especially true of the Baroque portraiture, that this chiaroscuro, as they say, chiaro, light, scuro, darkness. So just the name already indicates that these portraits, you know what I'm talking about, this Baroque portrait with very strong contrasty lighting. I spoke about those of you who were in Asia, mentioned this type of stuff also in the discussion that we have there. So we are going to ultimately, the scenario is ultimately going to be this moment that you have the photographer that we described before, and then there's a person stepping into the light, and there's some kind of a contractual relation between the artist and the sitter, and they collaborate on the project of allowing or facilitating the showing, the self-showing of the sitter. And this is, from the very beginning, it is understood as a collaboration, as a collaborative effect. And in this collaborative effect, both sides are supposed to be somehow involved there. And these will all be a question that we will eventually talk about, the nature of the involvement. But the point is, from the very beginning, the portrait has to satisfy two things at the same time. From the point of view of the sitter, it has to be a self-showing. From the point of view of the artist, it has to be a streaming of a place where the world opened up. So these two things have to kind of happen together. And when they do happen together, then we have basically the situation that is described in, not in every portraiture, but what is called commission portraiture. And we will talk about the differences in a little while. So this is kind of where we are going. This will be kind of the scenario that interests us. In other words, scenario where it's not just a question of the photographer just like, or the artist generally like roaming around looking for open places, but a not only situation where some beings step into the light in order to show themselves, but something that is really a collaboration between these two types, where the result is supposed to be an instance of self-showing that doesn't actually end at the point of the self-showing, because the streaming that we were talking about, the streaming through coupling, is supposed to take something immanent from this episode and to really kind of etch it in such a way that it will become like not just a document of the self-showing, but something more, something like the ultimate consequences, but something almost causal. So this self-showing can actually be transformed later to other stuff, and this stuff will actually have the capacity of reawakening somehow this moment of self-showing, both from the point of view of the sitter and from the point of view of somebody who's looking for open places, because to look at a successful portrait of this kind,
how would it apply then to a photograph of a portrait of a person that that person doesn't know about?
Good, very good. Very good. So all the stuff that we're talking about is really intentional. And if you don't have the right intention, it doesn't matter. So of course we can imagine a situation with somebody stepping into the light, somebody doesn't know, and there's some kind of a photograph that happens, but there will always be a question of the streaming, whether if the person doesn't know that they're being photographed. So something about the streaming is already corrupted a little bit. We have to decide on these things. But it is logical to distinguish between cases where there really is some kind of a coupling, and through this coupling the whole process begins, and other situations where it is more accidental or mistakes, if the camera just shoots, so there's a difference. And we can actually talk at some point about those mistakes, how to treat them, because they're kind of interesting also. But generally speaking, everything that we're talking about presupposes that everybody has the right intention. It's very much about intention. So this idea that you have the artist, you have the sitter, their intention is as we described, and they're kind of coupling together in some way so that this thing can happen. This really has to happen the way I'm describing it. This is not like metaphorical. This has to be kind of literally true. And both the artist and the sitter really have to be in this frame of mind that we describe as letting go of everything. Because if they don't, then again, something else will happen. So for example, there's a question, let's talk about the sitter for a while. So if you try to imagine, what about the motivation of the sitter to step into the studio, to the lights of the studio, and to kind of do this self-showing, with the collaboration with the photographer. If you think about it, so the question is, what is the attraction to self-show? What is it really about? Especially with the requirement is really this stringent that nothing else, it's not like coming out party, of debutantes or something like that you kind of step into the social light or something like that. This is metaphorical, and we really do not want to get involved in things like that. We want to get involved in really this intention of self-showing because, as we said in the other lecture, self-showing is a way of making yourself available to be part of the experience of other people. So you get yourself potentially intermingle with the experience of other people. This is kind of the point. But it has to really be like that. And one needs to be, to really let go of a lot of the other things that happen. For example, that it's prestigious, or maybe it's a good thing for other people to see about yourself, like all that stuff that certainly happens when there's a portrait. This is supposed to be, we're supposed to let go of that stuff. So let's talk. So the first question. So what would be? So we understood already a little bit. We spoke about Stillleben, still life, as a kind of an indication of our insatiable appetite for just seeing places where the world opens up. So we know a little bit about this. I hope I convince you that these things really exist, this type of appetite. But what is the appetite that leads the sitter into the light? So we have, there's this expression in English, the attraction of the limelight. Usually you talk about it like actors and people like that want to be in the limelight. But it's actually a pretty revealing expression because it really just basically says to step into the light. And the feeling is that this very basic thing of stepping into the limelight, we understand it culturally that there's already something attractive there, at least for some people. I mean, we spoke about early on that some people are in the dark, in the shadow land, want to go to the light. Some people are in the world of the light, they want to go to the shadows. Some people are in the shadow and want to stay in the shadow. Some people are in the light and want to stay in the light. So all these, I'm not suggesting that stepping into the limelight is something that everybody wants all the time. Nevertheless, it is an intention and a desire that we all understand, at least something that we can really relate to. And when we say stepping into the limelight, we kind of mean it literally, just to come to a point where you become accessible to others and available to intermingle with the experience of others. This is basically the point. But this idea, but the frame of mind that we keep on returning to, this letting go, at this point we really have to talk about it more because it's something quite extreme and quite specific at the same time. And you can, moreover, you cannot really approximate it exactly. And I'll explain to you what I mean by that. So, the idea is that you occupy a world that has a lot of layers of meaning. And the operation, the mental operation we're talking about, is letting go of layers of meaning. So the question, what does it mean to let go of layers of meaning? That's the first thing. And the second thing, what happens when you manage to do that? So let me begin with the second point. So here, this is where phenomenology, this is more philosophical and speculative, but also really interesting in some way, because phenomenology says that first of all, you're going, if you do this operation successfully, you are going to emerge differently. You will have different type of, you will be a slightly different type of being. And again, this is not metaphorical, this is literal. This is the first thing that we have to understand. And we emerge, so we do this letting go, we emerge. So when we are managed to let go, once we succeeded, plop, a new identity comes out, and this is going to be who we're going to be now. Now, this is a kind of a complicated philosophically, because it's not like there's a third thing that's deeper than the first and the second identity, and this third thing first becomes one and then becomes the other. No, this is not like that. There's never a third thing. You were in A first, and then you become in B second. But at the same time, when you get to this new identity, it's not as if you forget things or you have a problem acclimatizing yourself to the new identity. No. Once the thing plops out, you are there. And you are there completely. So it is as if this thing has been with you all along, except that it's not so clear that it was. So here, this is philosophically a little bit complicated, and that's where one of those points where phenomenology becomes a little difficult to accept. And I thought about it quite a bit, and I started asking myself for cases where this actually happens. So, okay, so before I get there, let's go back to the other thing about the letting go. What is involved in the letting go? So the first thing that we're saying here is letting go is some kind of negating. And if you manage to let go, what makes you successful is like that you manage to negate sufficiently violently or completely. So it's not as if you are letting go for the sake of something else. You are letting go because you are hurting and you have to do something about it, or you just cannot stand where you are now, or, but whatever it is, it has to be strong enough to facilitate this complete letting go, because only when you do this letting go, you have like this weird thing that plops up, and then all of a sudden you are somewhere else in a different type of world in some sense. So ultimately, both the photographer and the sitter have to do this letting go. Because if they don't do it, then whatever is going to happen is going to be something else. And that you have to understand. Phenomenology might be strange, but it's quite specific, you know. So the idea is that at certain points, a feeling of negativity becomes so strong and overwhelming that we're willing to kind of let go of everything. And if we can really do that, then plop comes something else. And this is going to be this thing that will do the metaphysics and the streaming and all that, and the showing, self-showing and all that. So first is the issue of the negativity aspect of it. And this is kind of an important point. But the second thing is about this idea that if you manage to do this letting go, something else is plop up immediately, and then you will have like a different identity. This is kind of phase transition, like from liquid to solid or something like that. It is the same matter, but in two phases. At a certain point, there's a critical point, and then there's some kind of a change. So this is something along these lines. If you want a non-mystical metaphor, so that would be like this will come close. So I started thinking about really cases where, in my own experience, and asking myself, like, if this actually happened to me. So, for example, the most simple example of this letting go is to let go of your social identity, the whole and all the world that goes with your social identity, with your social environment. So this is something that I suppose everybody can identify with. And I thought about how the first time I came to New York, and I really wanted something else in my life. I really wanted to let go. There's no doubt about that. And there's also no doubt about the fact that because of that, I really was able to somehow find myself in a place where I really felt very much at home pretty quickly. And I really felt that something like that all of a sudden that that I could really take on another identity, and that the whole thing really depended on the force of the power of negativity that I applied to trying to let go of my social identity. So, so first of all, this really kind of convinced me to look into the whole thing, because I really felt like that. I don't know if it was a week when I came to New York, or 10 days, but it was very quick. I mean, I was 21 or 22 at the time. But I kind of really remember this moment that at the same time the letting go of my former identity and the plopping up of another one that really came complete, and I felt completely at home, and kind of all my actions were spontaneous. I didn't need to relearn anything. It was all there already. So I thought that this is a relatively common occurrence that can begin to explain. Now, I had a roommate. We were both grad students at Columbia. And we, you know, we did the same thing. We were good friends. We went together, but somehow I was absolutely certain that he did not have the intensity of the negation of his former self that I did. And indeed, so I felt that what happened to me didn't actually happen to him. I knew it even at the time. So I really had the feeling that this is a kind of a limit operation that has to really be completed, and otherwise it doesn't really happen. So this is a relatively pedestrian example. Then I started thinking about other levels. For example, about letting go of your, what would be the expression, biological identity? Like you as an animal, you know, like you as a human being, to let go of that. And so I was thinking about, did you see Gorillas in the Mist? Did you see this film? So this is about like an anthropologist who photographs apes like gorillas. So he goes to the jungle with a camera, and he goes after the gorillas, and he spent really a lot of time. And then he describes at some point how he threw away the camera and he became part of the gorilla world. He kind of talks about it. And then he started going over the gorillas, and they catch him, and then they find out it's Anthony Hopkins. I recommend actually to see that, but the way he was describing this point where he could really let go and become part of the gorillas, and he could, you know, he became like a gorilla and he could move like them, and it was very evocative, this story. And again, you have the issue. So he spoke about how he became so tired of all his human aspect as a scholar and as somebody who researched, and the jealousy that he felt towards this completely free stuff that kind of allowed this complete letting go and then rebirth as something completely different. Then I thought about another, like maybe it's not exactly the same, but maybe the next level would be to even let go of the organic world and become part of the biological world, you know, that you're pure biology, and to think about, you know, the cult of the sun, how you kind of, you know, this sun worshipping, how sometimes when you do it for a second, you really have this kind of feeling that the way you kind of experience the sun is the way that all the biological creatures experience the sun, that it really has. Anyway, these are just metaphors, but so what I'm trying to say is that in every level, you can imagine this situation of very strong letting go that follows by whoop, something else comes, and then you become somebody else. So, yeah. Then I thought about, like, in the case of how do you become physical being? How do you to identify with physics, with the physics of the world? And I thought about skateboarders. You know, what happens when you're skateboarding is that the world becomes physics. And in order to operate efficiently, you have to let go of everything except the physics. So this is again another situation where you have a device that helps you to keep yourself always on that level that you want to get it, to the exclusion of all others. And of course you have it also in surfing, maybe downhill skiing, a lot of other stuff that has some of it, but somehow skateboarding, you can do it everywhere. So you can really imagine it more. It's not a question of going somewhere to do that, but it's a question of a frame of mind. This letting go of everything else that allows you this kind of identification with other physical being. That this is complete identification. And here too, the complete aspect is crucial because in all these sports, you're actually doing things that you're not supposed to be able to control. You know, when you go to a tip like that and you have to go down, in this point, I mean, from a mathematical point of view, there's no derivative in this point, which means that you cannot approximate it a little bit before. When you get to this point, in this point, things are really indeterminate in some level. So in order to be able to operate in this way, you really have to be completely immersed on that level of description. This is, so that's another level. Yeah? I thought it was a question. So, and again, the question, so there are two things here. The power of the impetus to let go, the completeness of this process, and the ability of something else to come out that will really be kept on that level and in that sense begin to be relevant to phenomenology. This is kind of the type of stuff that we are talking about. And it's pretty interesting. I mean, you have to understand that stuff is pretty new to me. So it's not like everything that I say is something that I completely thought through. But, so for example, this idea of the negativity, why does it have to be negative? Why does it have to be complete? So perhaps an indication of what is like the philosophical depth, yeah?
Also like if you do skateboarding, it also can help you to let go, right?
Of course.
Like not just skateboarding, also like mountain biking or whatever. It's a way of being able to let something go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're asking, I mean, I don't know. I spoke to some guy who was really one of the first ones, supposedly, and yeah, he told me that that's what he wanted. He wanted to be in a world where nothing matters except, you know, no advertisement, no text, no intentions, like a world that is really reduced to, you know, position and momentum and gravitation and all that as a way of letting go of everything and really creating for ourselves like a new identity that is somehow coherent. You know, that you can kind of live within it at least for a while. And usually, the reason why someone does that is because they're suffering in the present identity. This is the other stuff. Yeah?
But there's also the thrill, like, of risking something. Like,
Yes.
if you mountain bike, you can hurt yourself, or you can, yeah, you kind of go.
I mean, first of all, letting go is already a risk.
Mm-hmm.
That is the point. That is the first point. Heidegger says he calls the people who are willing to go through this process called the daring ones. He says the daring ones. And he says that even if it looks very negative, he says that and he says that it comes into being in anxiety. He says that anxiety is at the same time, first of all, is that we are no longer have a hold on the things in our world. It's not fear that is related to something specific. Anxiety is that we lose our hold on things as a whole. And losing your hold is a kind of a very strong, slightly traumatic experience because you feel you lost your grip, as you say. And when that happens, that might motivate you to be daring because you have nothing to lose. This is one of the scenarios. Nothing to lose. And the issue of anxiety that, but he says, but nevertheless, negative as it might seem, he said that there is a secret alliance between the anxiety and being daring and also people who just adventurers somehow. I thought it was kind of interesting that Heidegger would say something like that. Anyway, he does. So I think that one of the ways to understand what he's talking about and where he's coming from, and also to explain some of the crucial aspects of the argument, we should look again to Kantian aesthetics. It happened to us a few times already, that in order to understand something better, we went to Kantian aesthetic and we found something analogous, and then we spoke about how he took something and made it into something else. And now we will talk about the sublime, the concept of sublime in Kantian aesthetics. So, the idea of the sublime for Kant is you're standing in front of the pyramid, and you see that it's kind of finite because you see the layers of the stones in front of you, and then you look up and you feel that you are zero relative to the pyramid. And this is the sublime. The sublime is what happens when you feel infinitely small relative to something. And so then the first thing, so the first thing is this fear that you say that you are infinitely small, and then you say to yourself, aha, I really feel infinitely small, which basically means that I already have one foot in the non-sensible world, in the infinitary world, because my own state of mind is the best evidence that I have transfinite mental capacity, and they become known to me through the fear of things that seem so big that I'm infinitely small from them. So what is similar in this situation is, first of all, the fact that it's some kind of a process that involves actually not like analytic attitudes, but actually emotions or some kind of frames of mind. And at the same time, it's something that you have to kind of reject your finitude. That's the point. You have to kind of find a way of looking beyond the finite to something infinite, which you cannot really have a direct relation to. And yet, the very fact that you are afraid means that you have to, on some level, comprehend what it is, because otherwise you wouldn't feel infinitely small. You feel quite small, but quite small is not the same as infinitely small. And that's why I'm saying that whatever it is that you have to let go, this process has to be completed. Because to feel small is not to feel infinitely small. Therefore, you cannot approximate it. Either you comprehend the whole thing as a whole, and then you develop some kind of a fear to it, and therefore you get into the trans-sensory domain, or you don't. And so something kind of analogous happens in our case, that this letting go is something that kind of requires infinitary operation. We have to really cover something, a totality that we cannot comprehend, and to negate it. And once we negate it, then something else plops out. And this is the guy who said, I was afraid of this thing. That means I must understand some kind of a new infinite totality directly. So something similar happens also in this case. I don't know if you find it explanatory. I did, but Uh, as I say, yeah?
Actually, one of the questions I have too. One of it is like with this whole letting go thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is it like after you let go, do you still remember what was before?
Yes, you do on some level, but it gets a different meaning. And that I really remember from the time when I first got to New York, my pedestrian, personal example, how quickly my life in Israel receded to the background, It's not that I forgot about it, but it really immediately had a completely different meaning to me, Or to think about like Anthony Hopkins becoming a gorilla, It's not that he forgets the fact that he was a human being before. It's just that it becomes something else. And he transcended it. That's the point. That you have to transcend on a certain level. And that perhaps why the example of the sublime is a bit explanatory, because to transcend means to perform an infinitary operation that you're not supposed to able to comprehend, because you're finite. So this somehow proves to you that you have some new capacity that you didn't even know, and that allows, this kind of feeds into the things that pops up and begins to be the new identity. This has to happen completely, because you cannot really approximate it. You see, standing in front of the pyramid and feeling quite small is not the same as feeling infinitely small. And that is the point. You have to kind of, and that has, I guess, to do with the power of your own negativity, how negative you really are and how daring it makes you. So you are really willing to go through a process that you actually maybe not even meant to go through. And this is transcendence. This is the phenomenological version of transcendence.
So, crisis.
Crisis.
I mean, in the first lecture you also said that it was kind of an idea born out of crisis, right?
Yeah, I mean, one thing is very clear, that crisis in the sense of incoherence, and like that you feel metaphysically incoherent or inconsistent, that the different parts do not cohere. This is one from a metaphysical point of view. Everything that creates the ground of this state of mind must have something to do with incoherence or inconsistency. Something that you just cannot swallow, cannot metabolize. But I'm not sure. I mean, we can think of it together. As I'm saying, I'm kind of, and also Heidegger himself is not terribly clear about what happens, in this point. Merleau-Ponty talks about it a little bit differently anyway. So, but we really need this concept. That's what I'm saying, that we need this concept, because if we don't really describe well this letting go, then the whole theory kind of melts into like metaphor, It's supposed to be something quite specific. So we really need this concept, this strange concept that you're in a state and then you let go of everything. And if and this is like fed by negativity. It's not like you want something else. It's really about letting go of something and not like wanting some. So if this negativity is strong enough, then and you're willing, it kind of powers you to finish this process, then something happens. So that's why it is kind of necessary to get to this slightly more metaphysical modality of like having this identity that was not really there before, and the old identity is not exactly in the new one, and yet there is no ever a problem of self-identity. There's continuity. You don't have to learn to do stuff. You are completely there in a different way. This is also very important. So we need to swallow something along these lines. But I kind of convinced myself that it's actually something that that I can relate to. That really there are some points, maybe crises and maybe other stuff that really push you beyond certain threshold, and then when you come out, you are really transformed. And the point is, you can go back. It's not like once you are transformed, you cannot go back either. But at least during this point where that you become somebody else, in a very real sense. That yeah.
But I guess with you describing, that's the whole point of psychotherapy, because only in the moment where you're willing to let go of your self-image completely, like where you destroy your own self-image completely, it's possible to put the pieces back together. I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean,
And
I'm
it's
thinking
also
about,
this-
it's also, by the way, when this guy, at least in pop culture, this point about schizophrenia, that you go like from one identity to the other with some kind of an unbearable pain or something, that kind of releases another. So this is also describes something similar. But we really have, I mean, generally speaking, when we talk about phenomenology, we really have to distinguish between psychology and phenomenology. Because we are talking about like a level deeper than psychology, or really the metaphysical level of just being a being thrown into the world, you know, that with other beings, that has certain type of experience. Anyway, I'll think a little bit more about the relation to psychology. Next time I'll get back to it, because it's certainly an important point. Anybody else? Any more questions?
I thought about this, when you let go or make this reduction, then there is something that remains, right? That is the channel, the vehicle that you kind of use.
The body.
The body.
Yes, of course.
And this is, I wonder about this relation between that
Huh.
and the unconcealedness. Because the body is actually then whatever it
Mhm.
is.
Well, the body, this is something that Merleau-Ponty is good at, you know, about the idea of incorporated identity. Incorporated meaning that it's in a corpus, embodied identity. And he says that all our identity is actually embodied. The body, there's no mind here and the body there, but whatever we have is a kind of an embodied consciousness or something like that. Which means what? Let me think. Which means that if there's this kind of a jump, maybe you'll be able to do things you couldn't do before with your body also. Maybe it will also change your bodily, maybe.
I feel like it's more related to the topic of opening up to the unknown.
Yes.
Not pushing something aside that comes back together.
This is really
you
interesting
know?
what you were saying, because, okay, I didn't think I was going to talk about it, but it is exactly, this is really goes, you really follow the Heideggerian point, because what he says, he talks about, the way he described this process of letting go is that he says that you present yourself to nothingness. That's how he describes it. That it is the only way that you perceive nothingness through this kind of a letting go. And he makes this distinction that nothingness is not a negation. You have to understand nothingness before you understand what is negation. So nothingness cannot be an object, because if it were an object, then it would be something and not nothing. So he talks about nothingness. He says that there are many things it cannot be. So one of the ways that we know about this nothingness is when we do this letting go thing. So we find ourselves presented into the nothingness. This becomes the, which is, phenomenology and existentialism kind of go always together. So this idea, presenting yourself to the nothingness, this kind of has a nice existential ring to it. But that's a very important point, that it does have an object, but because the object is nothingness, then you can hardly talk about it as an object, and yet it is a kind of an object. So this is a very, very important point. No, great that you brought, because I didn't want to get, to another obscure metaphysical thing, but it's very important actually. So I'm glad that I had the reason to do that. Okay, well, it's 6:15, so I guess